What could be crazier than making up your own computer programming language, then having it run? Having it run based on a script-based interpreter that you wrote in a language that was meant to do server-side scripting. And this runs it as if it's an executable in Linux. I can write files in my own made-up language, mark them as executable, and run them. I'm going to show you how this works, and if you wanted to, how to do it yourself. First of all, though, I want to talk a little bit more about it. Why would you want to do something like this? There are reasons. You know, if you really wanted to have certain things really shorthand, you know, being able to enter things differently, you know, for your programming, you'll see here where there might be some applications for it. Generally speaking, though, I would rather, what I usually will do, rather than doing something like this, is I will usually write extensions to an existing language. I'll write a library, like say in this case, I would write a library for PHP, and I would require that in and call these commands as functions. I would write them as functions to that library, rather than writing a whole separate language, because once you do this, then you lose access to the core of the previous language most of the time. So, I mean, there are ways that you can give yourself some access in, or it just depends on which language you use. But generally speaking, this is useful for, there's a reason why people don't do this all the time. So let's take a look and see just how crazy of a language that I came up with, and why some of my friends might call me a mad scientist, and why you might agree. So, this is the language file. Okay? This is my language. Yes, I made up all of these different commands, and we will show what they do when we look at the language interpreter. But basically, here is where it calls for the script interpreter by the hashbang. So that's hashbang that calls my script-based interpreter, which is this file. This is a PHP file that's designed to interpret that entire this file here, my language. So all of these guys are commands that are defined in my interpreter. They will know what to do when it hits those. So that's what my language looks like. Let's take a look at the interpreter real quick. This has a hashbang calling, because it's an executable as well. It calls the PHP binary and gets PHP involved, which says I'm going to open up a file, read it line by line. I'm going to grab each new line, and I'm going to trim the right side. That's the line drop, because it's actually going to grab me the whole line drop too. And I don't really need the line drop. So I'm going to trim that off and get me my file pointer. Well, that's up here. You know, I got my file pointer here, and I use that to grab stuff from the file, well, to see if it's still got lines in here. Then I'm grabbing stuff from the file. But here I've got my stuff from my file. And now I'm going to explode that, and what that means is to pack everything based on the spaces, split it by the space, everything that's in my command line, the new command line. It's now going to be in an array here, and now I'm going to run through here and I'm going to check to see how many elements are in there, because if it's a blank line, I'm going to have no elements. I need to make sure I have at least one. It's got to be one or better. So, because I'm going to be calling the first one, and if I don't find anything there, it's going to fail. Now, if I was going to do this as a real programming language, I would not be using just this total explode. I would find my first space and split it only by my first space, giving me the rest of that as the arguments. But I just wanted to be simple on here, so that way it's easier to explain, easier to understand. And if you don't really understand all this, I've got lots of programming videos, and I will have a whole bunch more soon. So you'll be able to figure out a language that you can use to write whatever you want to by the time we're done, including in more professional languages other than scripting languages for this, because this is not a very professional job. I just wanted to see if it worked. And it does. So I'm going to take a look here, and here I compare against each and every one. I have an if, and then if else, all the way down to an else down here at the end. And I'm taking strings to upper on this, and that makes it case insensitive, then comparing it against an uppercase name. That means whenever I have something in here, like this shell command, it doesn't care that it's not looking like this. It's going to execute them the same way when it reaches them. So string to upper, and then see if it's spit. If it's spit, then we make sure that we have our argument that it's going to spit out. Now the problem with the way I did this is, if there's a space in whatever I want to spit out, it's not going to display anything past the first space. It's just going to spit out the first amount and then stop. So if I wanted to say hello world, as everyone loves to do in new programming languages, it would simply say hello on the spit command, because the white space made world not be a part of that. I would have to either grab each and every additional element of that array, or else, it'd be easier to just split it into two different pieces, the command and the args. That's what I would do if I was going to do this professionally. I was just going to say, if you wanted to do that, do it professionally. That's the way you do it. All right. But here it's going to take whatever that is. If it does exist, that second element in the array, then it will go ahead and print that on out to the console. And then what if the command is yell? It's going to beep. Now this is a backtick operator. That means it's going to send it back to the shell. Snooze command, that's kind of like sleep. So what am I going to do? I'm going to sleep. If we have that second element in the array, then we will use that for how long, how many seconds will it sleep for? How many seconds will we pause our program for? Otherwise, we're going to use 1. And I could have just said, hey, if we don't have over this amount, then I will set that argument to be 1, or otherwise set the argument to be, I could use the variable if I wanted to. But anyway, there's different ways to program. Shell is a way of sending it back on out to the output. Shell is my command. Basically here it uses the backtick again. It goes back out to the bash that started it. Sends the command out to there, and in this case I'm actually able to pass it a variable, and you can see this operator, it can take a variable argument in here instead of a literal. I used a string in this case. So if there is an argument here, then I can throw it whatever I sent it. If there is not an argument here, so I can actually enter bash commands on my language. I can have access to bash as well if I wanted to. Otherwise, it will pick its own command, and then it will give me the listing of my home directory is what that will do. And you can see it's also returning. See, that's why I'm able to echo this, is because it returns, that backtick operator returns whatever was output from that command. And slam gives me the break command, which means it's going to break out of my while loop. That's the loop that it would be in. It can break out of a while loop and go on down here and close my file. And so that's basically my exit, slamming the door on my programming, right? I'm exiting. And then if it doesn't recognize anything, then it tells me that I have an invalid command or whatever that command was. So let's take a look and see what type of program code we're actually going to be running in that case. We're going to be having it beep. We're going to be having it stop for a second, print out testing, spit out testing. We're going to have it beep again. We're going to have it stop for another second. Then we're going to give it, well, that was without arguments with the shell like that. That's going to mean that It's going to give me the directory list to my home directory. It's going to beep again. And it's got this work command. Do you remember that work command in there? The computer has a photographic memory and it doesn't remember it either. Well, it looks like it's going to go down there and give me the invalid command, along with one other thing, which we'll show that too. That's where I'm going to show one of the issues that you're going to have to take a look at if you wanted to write your own language. So then we're going to sleep for 3 seconds. Now I've given it an argument there. So now we're not sleeping for 1 second, we're doing it for 3. Then we're going to exit before we can spit out nothing. So nothing should never be displayed on here because we're exiting earlier. If this is displayed, this didn't work. But that's kind of the reason why we have that. And we could add a lot more commands. We could make it to where it has line numbers and go-tos and ifs and ands and buts and ors and whatever we wanted to. We can make it up. That's the beauty with making up our own language. But now let's take a look and see what does that look like on the terminal. I'm able to enter it because that was done in the binary directory, saved in my .bin directory, which is a part of the path, and these are both marked as executable. I can run this just by typing in the command name. Beeped, invalid command. That's my, what do you call that thing here? The hash bang. So we got to make sure here that it looks to see if your first line has a hash bang on it, and if it does, it should ignore that. And of course it doesn't know how to work. We made a lazy programming language, didn't we? But this is where we spat out testing. Now we've got all of our, this is our ls that it called. This is the home IP command that we gave it. Went out to the shell and got that. So this is one way that we could launch that. Another way that we could do that as well is we could take a look and say, we could pass it as an argument, and it would work the same way. So that's how you can write your own programming language. Make it up, write it, have fun.
Thank you for watching.